Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Development. It is Wednesday, January 29th, 2025 at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So we're here this afternoon to take testimony on H34, which is an act relating to workforce leadership in Vermont. So first up is Adam Grenold, Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, but Adam was also at one point during this whole process was the chair of the State Workforce Development Board, very instrumental in this whole process of getting us to where we are now. So Adam, welcome. Thank you for coming, and I hope your ride home is better than
Yeah, hopefully it's just down south. Thank you very much for the record, Adam Grenold, Executive Director of the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. Past chair, I served as on the State Workforce Board from, I think it was 2017 until this past July, when the board was, as part of the previous legislation, disbanded. And so, oh, yes, no, did you make it? And as part of that experience, really just have a lot to sort of share today at a high level. I see many new faces and many familiar faces here on the committee. So maybe just briefly a bit more on my background. After joining the board, I brought with me a real passion for workforce development. I'm a graduate of Castleton State College with a degree in education. It was a real focus for myself when I started at the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. For those who don't know, that is Wyndham Region's RDC. So when I joined, we didn't have a strong focus on workforce, but had been doing a lot of study under our comprehensive economic development strategy that told us of back then in 2014, the coming tsunami of the silver tsunami of retirements. So we knew we had to figure out something for our employers, as well as all of the employees, and how to align those two efforts. And through that early exploration, really discovered that there was a bunch of different participants engaged in workforce, but there was really no system. They were speaking different languages when they got together. Educators and employers, service providers were all sort of talking past each other, each with their own goals and objectives, and not really understanding how to translate each other's words, come together, and implement more of a system. And so through that awareness, I became involved in the state board, then ultimately as the chair, oversaw through that time period a lot of research and exploration about how we can do this better as a state. That every member understood the lack of sort of system. There's all the components and pieces there, but bringing it all together under WIOA was very difficult. WIOA is the federal program that delivers funding to the state for workforce development. That had just started in, I think, 2014 or 15, landed in Vermont during a transition from administration. So there was a bit of a lag in understanding how to implement that and what it meant. So that sort of pushed into almost 2018. We had a great 2 years where we had some good plans going. And then, of course, 2020, the core partner in workforce development was the Department of Labor. You may have read they had a few things to take care of in 2020. So it sort of slowed that progress down, quite understandably so. And then we had some fits and starts over that period, even pre-COVID, some amazing progress around the regions, all really coming together on the one point that we need to bring these different participants together. We have folks who are in state agencies and departments, and they report up their chain. Then we have all these other people, the state colleges, in some communities like mine in RDC, who is doing a lot of workforce development. In other places, they may circle around the local community college. So every part of the state had different sort of centers of gravity. We no longer had the WIB, which is a sort of a local workforce boards. So those had been disbanded. So there's a lot of people trying to figure out how to get together. And it was really clear through that need and desire that something had to change within the system. So I think it was in 22, the oversight committee was formed. You've heard of that, of the SOCWED. And that was tasked with engaging some consultancy assistance, going out and researching really what was out there. And I think you've heard all about that, so I won't dive into that, but happy to answer questions about that process. And as that all came together, they looked at really best practices in other rural states across the country. Who was doing this work in a low density environment in rural areas, and what did their system look like? How is it built? That report through SOCWED was created and recommendations were made on what to do next. And then last legislative session was really focused on creating that legislation that is now law. And then the bill before you folks today was necessary because so much of that system was changed in the previous legislation, but we had some conflicts that had to be sort of straightened out, primarily focused around job descriptions of the Commissioner of Labor in this newly created executive director, and who was responsible for what within this new system. Briefly, I wanted to speak about some of the real benefits of that new system, which is reducing the board size from, I think it was a high of 67, maybe 63, down to the 27 that it is now. And the executive director reporting directly into the governor's office, having perspective in the line of sight across the different departments and agencies who all report up through their normal command, but no one was in charge of looking at all of that necessarily from a systems level analysis of what's working, what's not, where's there opportunity, how can we bring people together? And certainly no one was looking at this for those participants outside of state government. So the real emphasis in the SOCWED committee was how do we create this opportunity where we're bringing an individual in who can have nothing other than every single day, wake up and think about nothing else but Vermont's workforce system. And then with that line of sight in that new position, be able to make recommendations to the governor about how to best build the system for future workforce needs. And so with that and with the new smaller board, the governance can change, the effectiveness of that board can be really leveraged in a way that it wasn't before. Bringing 63 people together to agree on anything was always a challenge. It sort of fell to overseeing the WIOA process, which was really receiving information, approving information, which is a required and important piece of WIOA, but not why people who are interested in changing workforce volunteer their time to serve on a board. So this really solves a lot of those issues. So I think I'll pause there and see if the chair thinks I've missed anything, and if I'd be happy to cover more or answer questions.
Committee for Adam. So I'm assuming that you're okay with page 34.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Just want to make sure.
If I wasn't clear on that, yeah, this is really just, I think, codifying what needed to be corrected that we simply couldn't accomplish last year through the legislative process.
Again, thank you, Adam, for your service to the State Workforce Development Board, but to the task force as well. Adam was part of the task force until July 1, when State Workforce Development Board ceased to exist. So his position as chair of the board was gone, but he still stayed, came to our meetings and was part of the decision making on where we are now. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, very welcome.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Have a good ride back.
I'll stick around for a while.
Good afternoon, everyone. Michael Harrington, Commissioner, Department of Labor. I'll keep my comments very brief in that the department was heavily engaged through the original formation of the SOCWED and then this second iteration of the Oversight Committee. We're happy to participate. I think in the end, there were, as Adam said, and I think he did a great job of running through the different areas in the bill. To identify a primary point of contact overseeing the convening and collaboration of all the moving parts and pieces of the state's workforce system, both within state government and outside of state government. I think the biggest thing for us going through the process was to make sure we were able to clearly articulate the role of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development, the role of the executive director, and the role of the board without removing necessary authorities for the Commissioner of Labor as the state's workforce administrator, which is needed under WIOA and by way of a couple of different programs that we administer. So I think we were able to do that. I think the committee was in consensus. And I think that in the end, what we got is a more nimble, agile board once they're up and moving, and someone who not only has an understanding and experience in Vermont's workforce system, but that can bring the partners around the table to talk about long-term coordinated strategies. I'll leave it there, but I'm happy to answer any questions that people have.
Again, thank you for your participation.
Absolutely.
It was good that, everybody was at the table and we all worked really well together to come up with this whole change that we really needed to have.
And not for nothing, I mean, the ability to make meaningful change without any cost associated to it, right? We were able to create the office, we were able to realign the efforts, and we were able to minimize the board without adding any cost.
And I think, we also try to put all the reporting together, and
Yep.
so we're not putting out 5 or 6 different reports, that we're trying to put them into all in one place. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner. Deputy Commissioner Smith.
Good afternoon, everybody. For the record, Kendall Smith, Deputy Commissioner at the Vermont Department of Labor. However, as it relates to this bill, I participated in the SOCWED with Adam Grinald, who just testified, Commissioner Harrington, Jay Ramsey, and a few others in this room in my role from the governor's office. So I will just kind of for a second hark back to that hat, so to speak. I feel like Adam and Commissioner Harrington laid out some of the history and the need pretty well. We are supportive of this bill, both from the Department of Labor. The governor's office does not have an issue with the clarity around the roles between what is the department doing versus what is the office doing. I think that's actually very helpful in this instance. That way we're not being duplicative, which is one of the whole goals of having the office, is this better coordination among all the system partners. So unless folks have any specific questions for me, I'm not sure there's more I can add at this moment that Adam and Mike haven't already shared.
Questions for Kendall? Again, thank you. It was, said it before, but it was a great working relationship with the governor's office, with Department of Labor, and I think with the legislature too. And Senator Clarkson is busy, but to get this out, and I think twice, because we reconstituted the SOCWED to do this purpose, but previously all of this came out and it was unanimous from the committee, and it was just a really good, everybody was focused on workforce, and I think we sometimes made compromises, but in the end, I think we get a pretty good product to continue to go forward. Thanks, Kendall.
Thank you.
Oh no, would you like to? Our new executive director? And I know we've heard from you before, but. More on this bill than.
Hello, everyone. For the record, I'm Sabina Haskell. I'm the new Executive Director of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development. My week 4. So I'm not, we're very supportive of this, very exciting. I've spent a lot of my time in the last few weeks meeting with different partners where I've met with Adam and met with Ellen and different people, and everybody just met with the broadband folks. Everybody is just very excited about this development and how we're going to be working together to strengthen the workforce system for Vermont and get more people into the jobs that we have. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Fine. Thank you. Just want. This is more formality than anything, but still, I think it's important that, we have it on the record that this is a well-supported bill. And certainly will be appreciating all the work that you're gonna be putting in.
Yes, I think I will be working. Yeah. Yeah.
To do.
Yeah, there is. It's exciting though.
We'll
Yeah.
be looking forward to the reports coming back.
Yeah.
Here, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. I didn't mean to-
Jay, is there anything you wanna weigh in on?
Hey Ramsey, I don't have anything else to add. I participated in this. The department supports it. I support it. It makes sense. And I can say it at the end of the table if you like.
But again, Jay was at almost every meeting and his knowledge of workforce and what not just what DOL does, but what the Agency of Education does as well was all of us when we were having us. So thank you as well. We can turn to Vermont Chambers. Jeremy?
Thank you. For the record, my name is Jeremy Little. I'm the Policy and Outreach Associate with the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. I've already submitted a testimony documents to the committee assistant. So if you guys want to get the full details of my testimony, that'll be in there. I'm just going to be brief for the purposes of today. So the Vermont Chamber broadly supports this bill and the efforts it makes to kind of coordinate efforts between various parties for workforce development. As we all know, severe labor shortages and a shrinking workforce is a very large contributor to a lot of the problems that our businesses are having with retaining employees and finding skilled employees. So that being said, this focus on businesses and duplicating their creativity with finding workforce solutions is going to be a really key element to this bill that we really strongly support. And then it's also very important to connect students with employers while they're in the education system, as this bill does, considering our diminishing secondary education population, and then knowing that our college graduation rate, the students that are graduating, we have the lowest retention rate in the entire United States. And so there are a couple of places in the bill that I've highlighted in my written testimony to consider as you move through the markup process. So on page 5 in clause 4A, there's a line that states develop strategies designed to reduce employee layoffs and business closures. And so we think this is a really strong clause, but we would also love to see language included on developing strategies to encourage employee retention and then employee growth for businesses as well. Hope here just kind of being that we would focus on using some of the successful policies that businesses have already begun to develop for this. And then on page 9 in section 6, the section mentions effective communication between the business community and other parties of interest, so governments, education. We think this is important, and we think that more language in the bill on kind of best practices to market and promote our workforce development programs would also be really important. The dashboard mentioned is a really great start, but building awareness of this and like of our other programs is going to be really important as we continue trying to move our workforce development programs forward. And I'm in the State House 4 days a week throughout the legislative weeks. If you guys have any questions, welcome to ask them now or just kind of find me out in the halls.
Just clarification.
Yeah.
So, clause 4A is where you'd like a little bit of a language tweak, but page 9, section 6, you're just highlighting the fact that this.
Right, yeah, and
Language.
if the committee can like find any other language to kind of like try to promote, like have practices to market and promote that workforce, beyond just like effective communication, maybe adding some like stronger language around marketing and promoting of those programs.
So language changing both. Great, thank you.
No problem.
Not sure if this is the right time, but have you offered specific language around these two issues?
I've not, but I can get some of that to you if you'd like.
That'll be up to the chair.
It'd be helpful. Michael?
I was just gonna say, I would like to see that language as well.
Yeah, I can get that to you guys by end of the day.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you.
You guys.
Hello there. Welcome. Did you want to say anything? There's only,
All Argentinian.
there's only one bowl of.
This was all that was left for lunch. Just saying.
Hoping you.
I know, you guys must have made a beeline over from the pavilion to get fed. I actually have nothing to add to this except that Mike and I have worked on this project with Ellen and the commissioner of, there he is, right there. We have the 5 and Jay Ramsey, the 5 of us and Kendall. We have worked together for 2.5 years. At least, if not longer. This is one of the best examples of the administration and the legislature working together in its most productive way. Don't you think?
Can I record this?
My dear, it's on YouTube. And I'll just give you a quick snapshot, and that's all I'm useful for because I got to go to committee. Mike and I love working together. We're in the same class, and I love working with Kendall and Mike and Jay and Ellen and Doug. We had, and who else? And Adam. And my God, Adam's here today, which is so exciting. There he is. I just want to say this began as a seed of an idea in Senate Economic Development, and I was ready to set up this office and, just set it up in legislation. And the administration came down, knocked on me, and said, "Let me talk." And the administration suggested that we actually take some time and look at what we do nationally, what's done nationally. And we did that. And so anyway, they suggested we do this and look at best practices around the country. So instead of setting up the office, which I was ready to do and allocate money for, instead we took some of that money and did a study and took the time to set it up properly. This bill that you have in front of you has had input and engagement from every party and every stakeholder. And I think it's very exciting. So we stepped back, we didn't set it up, we took a deep breath, and instead we have a really well-fashioned proposal. We have a refashioned state workforce development board. We have an office. We have a commissioner and we've clarified roles and responsibilities for the commissioner and the director and the executive director of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development. So I think it's pretty exciting. It's a win-win altogether. And for us as legislators to have one voice coming to us with one ask on workforce every year or every other year is a huge improvement over being nickel and dimed on every little small workforce development project that comes our way and that strikes the fancy of one legislator. It will now be evaluated in context of the workforce system And we will have really a central place for us to be considering what we both appropriate every year and what we invest our time and energy in. So I'm very excited about this. And my only sadness is that it ends our really productive SOCWED team from working. So we're going to have to come up with something else to keep us working together, is all I have to say. So thank you all for considering this and taking this up first. And another short thank you for the team of our two committees working together and having Small Business Wednesday, which I thought rocked. I thought it was great.
Thank you, so.
So is that what you wanted me to do? See ya.
Very good
Good
job.
luck. Have a great time, team. Bye. So good to see you.
Two ballpoint pens.
It's always wonderful.
You got two ballpoint pens.
Jeremy, was Megan going to speak, or is she doing that through you?
I think she's doing that for me.
Okay, very good.
Tough act to follow, Senator Fox. A lot of energy there. Awesome. Good afternoon, Molly Meyer. I'm president of the Vermont Ski Areas Association. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about this bill this afternoon. And thanks to everyone for all of your work to get workforce development to the point that it is now. And I also agree with the points that Jeremy just made from the chamber in terms of, positive framing and marketing. And I'll talk a little bit about, I'll be fairly brief, but I'm with the Vermont Ski Areas Association, also known as Ski Vermont. We're a nonprofit trade association for the ski areas. I was in here a couple weeks ago, but we have 22 alpine and 26 cross-country areas, and our members range in size from the volunteer run, small community areas, all the way up to the state's largest ski areas. Our industry creates about 13,000 jobs in the winter, and about a quarter of those are year-round jobs. So the ski areas require a wide range of skilled and professional jobs and occupations to operate. Anywhere from positions range from accounting, sales and marketing, IT, so those sort of back of the house office jobs, to the jobs that you more typically think of at ski areas: ski patrol, lift operators, ski instructors, mechanics, electricians, just to name a few of the positions. So we really employ a wide variety of people and skills. We have workforce challenges just like every other sector. In addition to the demographics issues facing the state, the rural locations of many of our ski areas can make it more difficult for them to recruit. However, our members do report that staffing has been getting better over the past 2 seasons, and that staffing was good. Staffing levels were good heading into this winter, so that's good news. We've also raised wages in the industry over the past several years. Most are paying well above minimum wage, and some are paying a starting wage of $20 an hour. So just really briefly, a couple ways that we've been supporting workforce development, helping students understand the opportunities, particularly in the year-round career opportunities that the ski industry offers, supporting them as they pursue studies, their higher ed studies in ski area and resort management, hospitality, environmental studies, and the technical skills. Our organization awards 3 $2,000 scholarships each year to graduating Vermont high school seniors. And then a number of the ski areas also offer scholarships to their local graduating students as well. Support for certificate and higher ed programs. Our recreation and resort management higher ed programs are a very important talent pipeline into our industry. Many graduates are working at ski areas and resorts in Vermont and elsewhere. Of course, we want them to stay here. Vermont State University has 2 industry management focused programs. UVM has a parks, recreation, and tourism program. And it's really important for these place-based learning opportunities to be successful, and our members support them, periodically reviewing curricula, placing interns, and hosting other learning opportunities. And in turn, we get qualified candidates with on-the-job learning experience at our resorts, and the hope that we can retain them to live and work here. And additionally, UVM has just stood up a hospitality certificate program. They're enrolling their first cohort now. And a ski industry certificate program is in the works as well. So we're really excited about that and broadening the pipeline into our industry. And we've also supported VOBA's work to create the bike, ski, and snowboard technician training programs as well that received some funding from VOREC grant. And then finally, just supporting apprentice programs and internships. We have a tramway maintenance technician apprentice program, which is a fancy way of saying lift mechanic apprentice program, registered with the Vermont Department of Labor. It's designed to bring in new employees and upskill and retain existing employees. It's a 6,000 hour or approximately 3-year apprenticeship program, sort of what you'd think of for electrical and plumbing apprenticeships. It includes on-the-job training under trade qualified staff, and then also a minimum of 75 class learning hours per level or year. And our organization administers the class learning for that program. So we support this bill, H34. Coordination of efforts across many agencies and organizations can allow collective resources to go further, creating a better trained workforce for businesses like our ski areas, more opportunity and prosperity for job seekers. And it will also help to identify workforce and training gaps so they can be addressed to ensure that a well-rounded workforce is available for our businesses. There are many, as we know, many workforce development programs, and it can be challenging for business and job seekers to get the right information and determine the best fits for them. So perhaps packaging of programs and resources, maybe by sector, could lead to better utilization rates of the programs. And the resources available when job seekers can more easily find a path forward into those fulfilling careers that fit their interests. And then just finally, better communication between the business community, state government, and training providers should lead to a better overall collaboration and outcomes for opportunities for Vermonters, our businesses, communities, and the state's economy. So definitely support this bill and look forward to working with Sabina and all the other folks that are engaged in this important work. Thank you.
Molly? Thank you, Molly.
Thanks.
You're on. Well,
Hello, everybody.
Tom, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Looks like my camera's not working. I don't have a lot to say on this bill. This is Tom Cheney, the executive director of Vermont. I just want to applaud the work of Aqued in today, and happy to weigh in as necessary if I can be helpful and mark up the bill.
Okay. I think you had some questions, some clarifying questions, and maybe if you can go over those with the committee so that we can bring those to our legislative council to make sure it's clear of what your thoughts are.
Well,
Maybe not.
can you hear me?
We can now.
Okay, sorry. I'm pulling up my notes here.
Okay.
So there were 3 areas where I just noticed as a reader of this where I thought maybe there's some clarity might be helpful. And on page 6, line 1, 7, where it talks about maintaining a free and secure electronic job board. Just wanted to clarify exactly what we're looking for here. I think that it is something like a job board or a micro, but that's actually a pretty clear definition, or pretty clear. But then you look at page 7, line 11, page 8, 9. We're talking about.
You're kind of in and out, Tom.
Okay. Maybe better for me to hold off then to get this sorted out.
Yeah, can you send that to Anna Grace and we'll post it?
Yeah, that'll probably be just as effective as us.
Okay.
He might be able to log in using his phone by calling them.
Yeah. We'll have a look at that. Helen. Katrina.
Hello. Been a long time since I've seen you all.
Yes, very vaguely. Ellen Kaler, Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund. So I'm here speaking on behalf of my organization, the Sustainable Jobs Fund, on behalf of and in support of H34. I got involved in the workforce development conversation probably 10, 12, 14 years ago at this point. And I served on the board for, I don't know if it was 6 or 8 years. And the reason that I got involved is because, as I think I've mentioned, our statute indicates that we need to, we're very focused on individual sector development. So the food system, forest products, renewable energy and that. And so we have a business coaching program. So we work with a lot of employers who are facing workforce challenges, whether it's having the right skills match, being able to find workers, figuring out whether or not they maybe have too many workers. And so maybe it's needing to downsize a little bit in order to then grow and add more afterwards. So a lot of different components of the workforce system. And so this morning, when I was showing you that, walking you through that grid of the market development one, that sort of all the little boxes, if you remember, there's one of the rows is around workforce. And so just like you work with individual businesses on their workforce needs and figuring that out, and up in elevation, it's the entire workforce system and how that impacts different sectors. So I really approached when I was on the board and then being a support any way I could to the SOCWED process, I was really there thinking about it from a sector, like a sector wide. So Molly's comments, for instance, from the Vermont Ski Area Association, spot on, because I think her examples of lots of different ways in which they're doing different types of programming and apprenticeships and internships and credentials and all that is taking that systems level approach to looking at how to build a workforce pipeline that services all the businesses within that industry, for instance. So taking that, so there's a need for the sort of, it works for every sector of the economy, soft skills, basic computer skills, showing up on time, like all of those important job readiness skills that impact every single job in the state. But then you also have the added level of some specific needs within certain sectors, whether that's healthcare sector, whether that's in the education sector, whether that's in the food system, farm and food sector. And so being able to think about in both of those ways is really important. And what I tried to bring forward for consideration as we work through all of this over many, many years. And so I'm excited about this bill because to have this new office in the office of the governor with a dedicated executive director with clarity about roles and responsibilities with the commissioner, I think is a really tremendous step forward. Reducing the size of the board really has been a big deal. It meant that I got off the board. There may have been other reasons too, but much of a troublemaker. But I think this goes a long way to cleaning up, in essence, what we couldn't get done, what you all couldn't get done last session. And I'm just really thrilled. I did have time to meet with Sabina, and I've sent her a bunch of materials and just really want to be as supportive as I can as this continues to roll out. It's the right move at the right time, and just very excited for your support on this.
Thank you for your help on it. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else on the sidelines would like to weigh in? Right on cue.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Hi. Hi, Rick.
I got here early, Mr. Chair. Rick Sagel, Office of Legislative Counsel. I was watching a little bit of the testimony, and I think there were a couple of questions about, was it part 6, part 4A on page 6? Is that page 5?
Yeah, those were things, yeah, it was 4A on page 5. And then
Thank you. Let me share my screen here.
Should we get that piece from
I get a question about process. And, you know, like if I want hearing testimony, it's like you left, you know, made me think of something else that would be kind of nice to add in there. Is that what we're doing right now? So if I wanted to say not only retention for keeping people in the job, but also retention for keeping people in Vermont, would that be something that could be added in?
We all agree.
If we, right, if we all agree, because I mean, that's a really good thing to have in there for a strategy to retention of employees.
So let's wait for Rick to pull it up on the screen so that we can actually see the language. And then we can wordsmith a little bit.
Okay. But that is the process.
Yeah. I have this big portfolio here. Here you go.
Like this is where.
I leave this around a while. You'll see this.
An and or an or.
Right.
Or two or four, right? They make a big difference. And so we have to be really careful and thoughtful. Rick will tell us when you change that, it's a policy decision. And so we're just listening for those kind of pieces.
Right.
But yes, that is the first time we're doing this as a committee.
The exciting part.
So did I start, Mr. Chair, on
Yeah.
okay. So just to give frame of reference here, we are in the subsection, I believe, dealing with the Commissioner of Labor and that office's authorities. So as co-leader of workforce education and employment and training in the state, the Commissioner of Labor, in consultation with the Executive Director of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development, where appropriate, shall. And so you have all these that I didn't hear any questions about. Most of these until we got to 4A, which is shall develop strategies designed to reduce employee layoffs and business closures and provide reemployment services to employees affected by layoffs and closures. And the question was, should we add language that is expanding this or that?
So I think what they were thinking of is develop strategies designed to reduce employee layoffs and business closures. And retention.
So would we start with designed to improve retention, comma, reduce employee layoffs and business closures? Does that make sense?
There was also a want to promote growth.
Madam Vice Chair, can you say, you said develop to improve retention and then I didn't catch the second after you said
Well, it's, do we say to improve retention, reduce employee layoffs and business closures, right? So, you know, growth makes me uncomfortable because growth of what? So we'd have to be pretty intentional about the choices there, but employee retention, you know, improve employee retention, reduce employee layoffs. It's the same thing, two sides of the same coin.
And I'll give committee a little bit of background here. The most of these have their own subdivision. So 4, 5, 6, 7. This is 4A and 4B because SOCWED believed that these were kind of related. So they should be kind of lumped in to the same sentence, so to speak. So that's why, you know, it's a 4A, 4B situation. They are different, but they're also supposed to be related. So we can also separate these if they become more different.
I mean, could you develop strategies for, and then employee layoffs, business closures, employee retention, all sub categories? Would that be?
Yeah, you can structure this, you know, kind of however you want. It's just a matter of, you know, what you want the exact language to be, I think is more important.
I'm not sure that making these changes is going to substantially change the job or the direction of the department. And so I just want us to be really careful here as we're looking at the language that we're not making changes just to make changes. So that's the.
The question then, this is describing the Commissioner of Labor. And so these are about reductions in undesirable outcomes, reducing undesirable outcomes, and then providing services to affected employees. And I think is growth or is that other side of the coin not appropriately within the bailiwick of the Commissioner of the Department of Labor? That we're looking, is that sort of, that's when the Department of Labor provides services, which I think was part of what Commissioner was saying, that these are the services that are provided and that business, that improvements to retention, either in a company, a place of employ, or to the state, it's not quite Beat-all's remit. Am I sort of understanding the thought there? Is that something that could be within the Executive Office of Workforce Strategy, for example?
Emily?
Can you come back to it?
Sure. Thanks, Abby.
I guess the way I read it, it seems like reducing employee layoffs is kind of the same thing as improving retention or focusing on retention. Right? If they're not being laid off, they're being retained.
Is there any other document that would provide like a day-to-day job description for the position?
Well, this is the commissioners.
That's what I mean for the commissioner. Or is this exactly in statute what is going to be?
Is Commissioner.
Happy to jump in. So again, for the record, Mike Harrington, Commissioner of the Department of Labor. If I remember correctly, when the committee was working on these two sentences, line 8 and 10, it's not new language. It's the fact that we broke them apart. And so they were one sentence. We made them a separate section, subsection B. But again, I think Representative Granning kind of spoke to this. Everything you're mentioning about potentially adding in here is work we're already doing. A lot of this is prescribed under our federal requirements and in other state statute, right? So again, this is just a re-articulation of kind of all that we do specific to Section 540, the Commissioner of Labor related to workforce. But we are required to do these in program requirements. And so this is not all that the commissioner does. This speaks specifically to the workforce system. And then there's obviously all the requirements of our various programs under that. The big thing here was trying to, again, reduce layoffs and closures. So a big portion of our work is going and working with employers to find ways to prevent layoff or avert layoffs. It's called layoff aversion services, and then provide reemployment services. So again, those people either who are employed, making them more, either helping them upskill or diversify their training to make them more retainable, or if they're displaced from work, again, providing direct employment services to them to help them be reemployed more quickly. But again, the details of how we do that are articulated both in Title 21, but also in our federal requirements.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess, sorry, just to finish my point. I think because of that, does it make sense to reiterate all of that in this particular document? I'm not saying, I'm sorry, just to clarify, I'm not, I guess, the question about the retention question feels like, to Abby's point, like maybe we're kind of doubling back and doing the same thing. I think the employee layoffs does it. I think to your point, a lot of those duties are in other areas. So I don't know, this goes.
I would also add some of this, like this may not be the greatest example, but, and not to bump ahead, but if you look at, section 7, the next page, line 1, where it talks about the free, this is what, Tom was mentioning earlier, that, about the free job board, workforce, employment job board. We have to articulate that under our federal requirements in our state law. So some of this too is also to meet the federal requirements so that it's clearly articulated that the Commissioner of Labor as the state workforce administrator has these duties under them. So again, this also may be a part of that. I just don't know for sure.
So we talk about words being really important. There's a difference between layoffs and retention, because retention is also trying to keep people that are thinking about leaving. So just a thought.
Okay. Just Jay Ramsey, Workforce Development Director, Department of Labor. I think I want to talk a little bit about the retention piece that you're mentioning. Sure, yes, we would like to see employers retain their employees. But we're talking about individuals who are making their own decisions. And so we might take a view from an industry perspective that someone is using one employer to get experience and they're going to another employer within the same industry. I think you're also talking about retaining people in Vermont. I don't know that our system kind of contemplates retaining people because we're talking about the free will of people. And certainly we know that it is in the state's interest to try to have reasons for people to be here, but that might be a little outside of the scope of the statute for us.
I try my comment then. I don't know if that makes any difference.
That's an individuals and employees are not seen, we're not thinking of them in the same way. That you're talking that notion of retention is getting into an individual's choices that's outside of the scope of a workforce program. Do I understand that correctly?
Well, the workforce system, as you heard from Molly and some of our other partners in the system, is about how the industry organizes itself and how those employers and how the state, through our workforce programs, help people understand how to get from point A in their career to point B. So we can all think of our own story about a career path. That's really the structural mechanism that we use in workforce development to help people. We're organizing education and training experiences with employers to help build skills so people can earn higher wages. They can find greater fulfillment in their work world.
I think following up on someone's point that this, if I understand the purpose of this bill, is really to kind of clean up some of the things that were done last year. And sort of the last year's bill created a structure around the office. And what we're now trying to do, correct me if I'm wrong, I think is trying to clarify, who's supposed to do what, what the respective roles are. And I confess, I don't know enough about last year's bill to make sure that it hasn't already been covered in last year's, the specific issues we're talking about, which I think is really important. But to make sure that we haven't already talked about them. Or I think as the commissioner noted, maybe there's some other provision in the department statutes that talk to that. Just personally, I want to learn a little bit more about that before interjecting something here. Not that these are good issues, absolutely good issues. I just don't want to upset apple carts and stuff. That was a question, right? No.
You want to know more about the act that passed last year?
I can find out, I just don't want to do something here that might conflict with what the bill was last year and what some of the commissioner's statutes already are.
Yeah. So
I don't know the answer to that.
Again, as far as my role is concerned, I'll tell you that I've been the person on this area. I started here a little over a year ago, but this was one of the first things I did was help with SOCWED. I have had my eyes on it. Last year's bill I wrote, this one I wrote. The SOCWED committee was virtually the same from for the first iteration to the second iteration. They met 7 times on this specific bill, ensuring that it lined up with, what's currently in law, what we changed in Act 146. So as far as I'm concerned, this matches up with what was done last year. It cleans up because what we did last year affected this language here. We couldn't get to it. I think Adam Brinold explained why that happened. So this is necessary to ensure that what we did last year is properly organized.
Just, it would be, if you could give us, it would be important for me to know whether some of the changes that we're thinking of in the Vermont Chamber, for example, proposed are properly clarifying, something that hasn't already been said. So it's not covered under last year's bill. Yeah, fine, okay. That's something that wasn't dealt with. It's not covered under the commissioner's statutes, I think that's fine too. I just don't want to make it complicated.
So I just want to broaden what Herb just said, because there are very few bills that we're going to take up that don't intersect, probably none, that don't intersect with other law, right? And so it is our legislative council's job to help us navigate that, right? Because not all of us know all of those green books line by heart, right? So I don't. But it's an important point, right? Because every time we make a change where we could be impacting something else that's already in law, whether it was something that was done last year or 20 years ago. And so we will be navigating this, right? Like, again, it's our first one for this committee, but we'll be navigating this throughout the session. Commissioner.
Just building off of what Representative Granick said. Part of our role too in being here is to make sure and to help inform the committee what is being added or not added and what is the impact it will have. There's nothing, as we're talking about this right here, that will have a negative downstream impact on any other statute, rule, or law that we have. I think getting back to the original intent of what you see before you is that the original Section 540 didn't speak to the role of the executive director of the State Workforce Board, or in this case, the executive director of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development. So really what you're seeing here is, let's talk about, and you'll see this the further you get there. We started on the SOCWED more about what do we want the executive director to do, and then let's talk about what will still need to rest with the commissioner. So this is not meant to be all inclusive of everything the Commissioner of Labor does. It really is meant to say, when we have this co-leadership, what are the functions and responsibilities? And again, I think we really started with the executive director in mind because we wanted to elevate that role to somebody who could coordinate across the system. And then we said, what kind of key pieces do we have to have under the Commissioner of Labor to retain the oversight of the state's workforce system from the federal requirements? Again, so this isn't meant to be an exhaustive list. There's nothing in here that has downstream implications, really what you're seeing. And I think if you go through the rest of this bill, you'll see that it's really just trying to articulate clearly who is in charge of what function. And you'll see that later on in the bill.
Good with the language that we have, does that give us enough, give the commissioner enough direction, broad enough for the commissioner to, really making sure that to try to reduce employee layoffs, which in turn reduce business closures as well. We need to add more to that. I mean, I don't think that business growth is part of purview of the Department of Labor. And I would say that you can post them. Can you post them? Too?
Mhm.
But I think retention is, in my mind, the same as reducing employee layoffs. Certainly don't want to, we want to. And I think in this context, it's not. It's more about the department being there to assist in when businesses are looking at reducing their workforce. It's not there to try, it's more there to help them stabilize and I don't think and I agree with Jay, it's not as a retention tool, it's more of a stabilizing the business when it's having some issues. And what can Department of Labor do in that situation? I don't know, maybe that's the way I look at it.
Is there like an actual technical governmental definition of layoffs versus like, I don't know, other ways of letting people go from their jobs?
Well, I think you have, yeah.
Yes.
Yes, there is. Okay, and so this is specifically dealing with layoffs and not if somebody's performance isn't great and they get let go of their job.
Correct.
Okay.
In this, I would say the intent is, we're really talking about, we call them mass layoffs.
Okay.
Right, so, you can define, there are a couple of different definitions of mass layoff, but we're talking about like a reduction in force, not the termination of one employee for poor performance. And they're entitled to our services just as much as anybody else. They're not precluded from our services, but this is more about reductions in force or mass layoffs due to downsizing, things like that.
And to go along with that, if you then go 4B, and provide those reemployment services to employees affected by layoffs and closures, right? So that's, they go hand in hand, and so I don't know where retention really fits in this or job growth.
Yeah, I agree.
Or business growth. It's kind of a different animal there.
I captured Mr. Little's comments as being related to employee retention and employee growth. And employee growth certainly would be a component of workforce development. And that's what I captured in his discussion of this. And he did suggest he would be getting us proposed language. Maybe we should wait and take a look and see what he says, and maybe it is apropos, but I'm certainly comfortable with what I'm seeing in the bill as composed. But employee growth, if that was his concern, is a proper function of workforce development that we may need to address.
Yeah, but
if it isn't covered elsewhere.
This is a different context.
Right.
In this context, we're talking about, employee layoffs and business closures, and then making sure that the department is providing those reemployment services to help those employees find new jobs.
Two things. One is workforce development is that we're employee growth, right? Every time we talk about workforce development and opportunities. The other thing is going back to, as we're doing this for the first time, there's always the opportunity for amendments, and they can come in from us, from individuals on the floor to the committee, right? There are lots of ways to talk about amendments if we get language that says, oh gosh, we totally missed that, or we really want to clean that up, or something like that. And that can be done until it passes out of the House. So after the until we pass it off as the third reading. And then it can be done again in the Senate. So there, it's not a done deal, but we want to get it really, really good so that we don't have to be done. That's just a process thing.
Yeah.
Herb?
I would also have to read back at the previous sections. Well, actually, the beginning clause, in terms of what the Department of Labor's responsibilities are. And it starts off with in subdivision 1, a pretty broad directive. So there's in the further subdivisions, they got, specific ones. But with that broad, my perspective, with that broad, you got to do this stuff. You got to share the coordination, administration of workforce education, employment and training programs. That's pretty broad, basically. That's going to cover a lot of things. The other thought that I had was subdivision 8 covers quite a bit too. Ensure that the state workforce education and employment and training activities are aligned with available workforce. Openings, specific credentials. So, I think there's a lot of broad stuff that's there that might encompass some of the specifics. We might want to make it more specific, but I think it's covered in some way, from my perspective.
I went through my comment. I'm okay with it. This is okay. Sorry. No, that's what I went after hearing his testimony. The testimony, that's fine. But
That's part of drawing out, having questions and drawing out the testimony that you need in order to feel comfortable with what we're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, it would be nice to hear what Mr. Little wanted to suggest, but
I mean, I understand what they're trying to do, but in the context of that section, it really doesn't fit.
I was gonna say his testimony letter is on the,
It's on today's.
on Jeremy's.
Yeah. So are we okay with just leaving this language? Okay. Let's, the next one was on page 9, section 6.
Okay, so just to bring us back to where we are. This is subsection E, which is as co-leader of workforce education and employment and training in the state, the executive director of the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development in consultation with the Commissioner of Labor and the State Workforce Development Board, where appropriate shall. 6 on top of page 9. Facilitate effective communication between the business community, state and local governments, and public and private educational institutions for the purpose of workforce pipeline development and job placement.
And I think the thought that the chamber had encourage language regarding thinking and acting strategically about how best to market, promote, and package programs for all the various users of workforce development folks.
would that be effective communication?
I'm not sure what he's getting. That isn't covered, in the rest of 1 through 8.
I mean, it sounds like he thinks we should, in this section, page 9, section 6 talks about internal communication, and he wants us to also talk about external.
Oh, good.
That's my read, at least on it. It's like,
Between the business community, state and local government and public and private educational institutions. So should be all the people.
I think it's kind of covered.
Said just maybe breaking it down. All right.
Isn't the request to package the programs of all the various users of the workforce? Um, isn't that the jobs that we're already lining out to do? With the secretary, or not secretary,
With the executive.
the executive director? Like, I think maybe that's a separation of duty because that's not really the commissioner's job.
Well, no, this is under the executive.
Oh, this is where, under that.
Yeah.
Both are in here.
Okay, sorry, no, I thought so,
Yeah.
misread, but I still stand at, isn't that the job? The core functionality of the job?
I hear what folks who, advocates for different issues are looking for and hear a little more clarity, a little more detail, and I think that it's here. It might be a little minimal for them, but I think it's here, and so, I guess my question is, probably for the commissioner, maybe for Jay, questions on definitions of workforce development or workforce programs or workforce credentialing. Are those definitions elsewhere? And this is referring back to them. Do we need to define any of those better?
I don't know if there are definitions elsewhere. They are pretty common terminology in our world. So again, credentialing is pretty common and widely known and used. Workforce, and it's used pretty interchangeably. Technically, workforce is not the technical term, labor force is, but workforce is used uniformly across both state and federal programs. The other thing I was going to mention on number 6, because that seemed to be where we were last were, that's even though it's new because I think we moved it, it's actually old previously existing language. So we just moved it under the executive directive, but it is existing statute under the original.
I'm wondering maybe to split the difference, does it make sense for 6 to say facilitate effective communication and coordination between the business community?
I didn't hear the rest of that.
To facilitate effective communication and coordination between the business community, state and local government, and public and private educational institutions.
Would you be able to get that capable?
My computer restarted, just.
Oh, is that right?
So I am slowly getting back into, I apologize. Just no warning, just restarting.
Some of that coordination, like, see, paper does come.
I have, yeah, I have the paper.
Some of that coordination language just highlighting for the committees on page 7. But I think that if I remember, again, I'm trying to remember back to the document, some of this was making sure there was a clear articulation on the communication piece and coordinating communication. Now, could the two be combined? I don't see why not, but I think that was how we got to where we didn't want to get rid of communication because it already existed. It was highlighted, but we wanted to add the collaboration piece as well.
The other thing, just to point out to folks that's really important, is in the report at the end, we want to know how it's going, we will have opportunity to make modifications as in the future, so if it's not clear that this isn't working or that isn't working, and we want to get it right. And we also have,
So spring is back. I believe we're still on subdivision 6. I had to focus on this for a second, but I think you talked about adding the word coordination after communication.
Yeah. Also, if it's in line 11, it's section 2, and it says within page 7. Does it state in the
Coordinate across public and private sectors.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think we're doing that already in subsection 2.
Would combining the two offer any additional clarity?
sometimes you find when you combine them, that it actually causes more confusion than clarity.
Yeah.
So people can choose to read it one way and not the other, and when you separate it, it's very clear that this is about this and this is about this, and so.
Yeah,
it's
I
a
think here
balance.
what we're telling the director that we want them to work with the business community, local, state government, but this in the private institutions, we want them to coordinate to facilitate that communication. It could be regional get-togethers. Could be, getting together as a whole state, could be a whole host of different things that. But what we want them to do is facilitate that communication. And I think within that, you're gonna be then, back to 2, be coordinating with all of those. But, I mean, I think we pretty much let the ED know what the expectation is. I mean, the chamber's thought is, how to market, how to promote package programs. That's what they're.
This would offer them support in doing that, though, wouldn't it?
As it's written?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's wait and see what they bring to us so that we can maybe get a better idea than not here right now. And then we can figure it out. So we'll wait. Tom had, here. Been posted on their page. You probably have to refresh.
I just used the link that was emailed.
Yeah. So, so if we go to, subsection D7 on page 6, line 1. This is. So it's maintaining the job board, job link. Was thinking, should we clarify whether this is intended to include all post-secondary credential types from apprenticeships to certificate degree to certificates to degree? Okay.
That line is referencing the job board that the department is required to have for employers. That facilitates the connection between job seekers and employers. And we do take inspiration from the other parts of this bill that are being proposed. And when the committee was meeting, we had a lengthy discussion about a consolidated resource, whether, I don't remember what the language we were playing with at the time, but the goal is to try to have our job board be a resource for all training opportunities in the state, not just the ones right now that are approved for the federal funds to be used on. That's a limitation kind of the current system, but the vision is a system that anybody could access and see where they could go get training that they want and whether or not federal or state funds could be used on it. And that it's all in one clearinghouse is the way that we got stuck on, right? But that this line that it's referencing, a secure electronic job board, is what we already are required to do from the federal government. And the secure part is important because there's employment fraud. We don't want people going in and applying for jobs that are with fake employers and then submitting their tax documents and someone lifting a social security number. So that's what this is referencing.
Does it cover enough of the credentialing, training, education? Is it broad enough to cover all of that?
It's got certificates. It's got apprenticeships. So under education and training, pertains to certificates and degrees, I'm assuming.
Yeah, education would apply to a degree and then training is certificate for that.
Except it's education and training, which is one thing. It's not separate things. So we're not talking about education, comma, training. We're talking about, right, the things that are education and training components together.
Yes.
I don't know if that makes a huge difference, but
I guess at the end of the day, how at some point in the future, when I'm not in this role and someone else is needing to interpret this, I think that person would broadly interpret this to mean education and infer that there's a comma.
I would say that the other thing is that there's, if you really felt like it needed to be clarified, you could say as prescribed by the Federal Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. I don't think you need to. The whole goal is we are required to do this. This is codified in state statute. I think Kenny's concern was he operates a similar type feature that focuses on training opportunities. And so I think he was wanting more just clarification. Is this specifically talking to the job board that the Department of Labor already operates, which is Vermont JobLink, or is it broader than that? I think the intent here is really just to say it can be as broad as it needs to be, but it has to be codified in statute. The more prescriptive you get, unfortunately, that also limits your ability to be innovative at times. But I don't think it's meant to take away anything from Tom's work. I think he's testified and we've testified about partnering in the future. But again, just for clarity, this is specifically about our job board requirements under the federal statute.
What about, it says education and training, what if we get rid of the and, put a comma, then it says education, training and credentialing opportunities?
Again, I don't know whether the comma makes a difference. I mean, the education and training is a common combined term that we run into in the federal government, or employment and training is another common term. But again, I'm not sure that the comma does or does not break this in any way.
So I'll note that we are calling this entire, where does this start from at the very beginning? It's workforce education and employment and training leaders. So we're already kind of combining these elements into broad, big categories, not just education, not just employment, not just training. These are all kind of combined. And that's, I think, due to Department of Labor's knowledge of the federal requirements. So that's kind of as a backdrop.
Mr. Chair, could I just speak for a quick minute on this?
Yeah.
So first I just want to say, these comments are purely offered just as a spectator looking in and saying, hey, and kind of speaking this language a little bit to say there may be, specifically when we look at the three sections I flagged, potentially some question as to whether, what's the difference between this section versus that section versus another section, or the lists that we're referring to that need to be publicized. Does not have to do with my work specifically, but I come at it, speaking this language sometimes. So the one we're looking at right now on line 1, that's up on the screen, totally. I mean, I think you could rephrase it in different ways. I don't think you need to. It really kind of comes back when it gets into workforce development program, workforce and education program. I forget the other one that I mentioned. What are the differences and how do they interplay with this section? Is I guess what I was just thinking might be helpful to be clarified.
Tom's perspective, I think, this is sort of directing the Department of Labor and the office. And from my perspective, I think it's clear about what it is asking us or requiring us to do.
And that's good enough for me. I just wanted to flag it since we were looking at language.
Yeah. Good to look at. Okay, then on page 7E2, line 11. I think Tom is bringing workforce development program. Do we have a definition of workforce development program? Or do we need to clarify what that is more?
My only comment, I mean, that was in Tom's comment, right? Like, I would just ask maybe for clarification from Tom, just because are you looking for something to be more or more broad or more specific, I think it's meant to be as broad as we need it to help us implement, thinking about the intent of the SOCWED and what Senator Clarkson and you had in mind, Mr. Chair, right? Like the idea was to be as broad as possible with regards to workforce programs, so we could get as comprehensive database list as possible, right?
Sure. Mr. Chair, if you're looking for me to jump in here in response. Yeah, and really this one was, sometimes we hear in language and is the workforce development program is pretty narrow. So you may be talking about an organization like Vermont Works for Women, or you may be talking about a particular program that it offers, or you may be talking about often like a certificate program. So I think just trying to get clarity on is there, are we looking to coordinate across public and private sectors to ensure that, credentialing opportunities, job seeking support opportunities, job training opportunities, just kind of how broad is the intent of this to be? I guess was my question. And what I'm hearing is that it's intended to be everything but the kitchen sink in terms of workforce development options. Sometimes when the word workforce development is spoken, it's narrow to very limited types of programs. So I suspect that is not in this case, but that's why I was flagging it.
I would also say that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in this case, when we talk about program, we're not talking about an entity, right? So we're talking about a program as a service to an individual so that the individual is aware of the services that are available. Correct.
I'll add, it's not defined. And when you have a term that's not defined, it can be open to interpretation. However, one of my portfolios in my job is workforce development. So that's not defined either. It's just one of these phrases that you kind of know what it is. And in fact, this Title 10 that this law is in is conservation and development. It includes economic development, workforce development. So it's a very, very broad thing. And it certainly does not limit it, as Tom was saying, this does not limit it to anything specific other than workforce development. So if that helps any.
Oh, sorry, no, I'm stretching.
Get in trouble that way.
Okay. Are we good there? Okay, and then I think Tom's last was page 8, subsection D4. Line 9. Create, maintain, update a publicly accessible inventory of all known workforce education and employment training programs. What are workforce education and employment training programs? Is there an intent to overlap with D7? Or is this a list of organization and non-credential bearing programs they offer? Jay?
This item is a carryover from the previous list in the old statute of commissioner's responsibility. And so the way that this has looked in the past is an Excel file is compiled of all the programs that the legislature funds in different parts of the budget across all parts of state government. And whether it's a training program administered by Forest Parks and Rec, or it's a training program that's aimed at think about that, veterinarians and loan forgiveness. It's a listing of all of the efforts that the legislature has put in the budget or that exists through federal funding. That's supposed, I think the intent is for it to be published and searchable so that anyone could find an opportunity. It's been funded through But there is some overlap with this and the previous item we were talking about.
I guess two things that are occurring to me is that like just as a process of getting the sort of publicly available job board on there, that this spreadsheet might end up having to be a thing that exists anyway. And also would the job board double as fulfilling this requirement? No.
Just to respond to, I think that many of the things that would show up on that inventory would be on the job board, but some programs like a loan forgiveness program for different occupations isn't something that we would have displayed on. So there's some value to having this all in one place.
Yeah, a question please on the legal definition of all known. Is that a fixed point in time that deals with the date of, does that limit us to the date of enactment?
No.
Or does it in fact move forward and
It moves forward.
continue to allow?
Yeah, all known at the time you are reading this, it's today or tomorrow, whenever you're looking at the law, all known right then.
Thank you.
Do you want to weigh in on this? Are you okay with what you've heard?
Yeah, did I hear generally that this sounds pretty similar to the information on D7, which is the, what will be displayed on the job board?
Some of it, but not all of it.
Yeah.
If I could too, like one of the aspects of the inventory, again, separating out the job board is really meant for job seekers, employers, right? With a very specific connection there of employment or career advancement. The difference here, one was obviously, yes, a resource, but two, a resource for policy and lawmakers as well. So if I remember correctly, part of the inventory was also about tracking where is funding going, which wouldn't necessarily be a part of Vermont JobLink, right? So who is receiving the funds and how do we make sure that they're not duplicative in nature?
And I think my thought of flagging it was just, does this legislation ask the commissioner and the executive director to produce a similar list? And so just part of the reason why I raised that question.
I think we just need one list. Hopefully somebody produces it.
In a way that is useful.
Yes, exactly. I think that's, thank you for staying with us and helping us work through this. Appreciate the comments and gives us the ability to look at it a little deeper. So thank you. I don't see any need to make any changes there. We'll wait for Jeremy to come in, his language proposals. We'll take a look at that, I think Friday afternoon. We have a little time. And if we find, maybe we can kind of decide if we want to think, if not, then Friday. Get it to the floor next week, so. Any more questions, committee? Okay, so on the floor at 3, back here at 9 tomorrow.